His new movie, Crimes of the Future, is more than 20 years in the making. It's set in a world where humans feel no pain, can grow new organs. For more, I am joined by David Cronenberg, live in our Q studio. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Congrats on the film.
Thank you. It was a sensational screening in Cannes. It was actually the first time I'd seen it on a big screen, believe it or not. And there was an audience of, I guess, 2,400 people. First time I saw it with an audience.
How does that feel for you?
Cathartic, you know. I mean, you make it for an audience, and yet I've only been seeing it with, people who are working with me on the film in various capacities. So it is a catharsis, and it's exciting. It's a little scary just because, I
was wondering about that. Are you still watching?
Yeah, because, I mean, you are vulnerable. And in a way, that's what the movie's about. You have an artist in the movie who literally is offering his insides to his audience. And I feel like that. I do.
I was going to ask you about that. I had a plan to ask you about that.
Yeah, see, I knew that. I could tell that you were going to ask that, so I subverted you.
You know what? We don't have any more time for the interview's done now. I'm going to head off.
Okay, thanks. Goodbye.
You can do it by yourself. I'll go have a smoke.
I probably could. I've done at least 100 interviews so far. So,
well, let me get some preliminary stuff out of the way then.
Sure.
So, you had this sort of in your drawer, the script for this film, for how long? 20 years?
Yeah, I think I wrote it in about 1998, so over 20 years. Yeah.
And why was now the time?
Well, now was only the time because a very entrepreneurial producer, Robert Lantis, with whom I've worked several times, and we've been friends for many years. I think the first time we met was 1975 in Cannes. He convinced me that the script, which I wrote long ago, as we said, and thought was probably quite irrelevant now because it was sort of a sci-fi script with some anticipatory technology involved. I thought it would be quite irrelevant given how technology moves on and society changes. And he said the classic line, he said, no, it's more relevant than ever. And I thought, really? How's that possible?
Why was it more relevant than ever?
Well, because of the subject matter, because it's talking about the evolution of the body, but also about eating plastic, basically. And suddenly, nobody was talking about microplastics when I wrote the script. And now every day you see a new microplastics revelation. That is, now they've discovered that microplastics have been found in the bloodstream of many people. And it is in the bodies of maybe 80% of the people on Earth right now, microplastics. And yet the body seems weirdly, at the moment, to tolerate it rather well, which is a big surprise. So, strangely enough, in this movie, I propose that the solution to the way that we're destroying the Earth, partly with plastics, is not to stop production of plastics, not to say we'll clean the Earth, we'll clean the ocean, we'll clean everybody's bodies of microplastics. We will stop production of plastics. If you think about it, none of that is very likely. The alternative is that we eat plastics. I mean, that our bodies can absorb it and use it as nutrient, and therefore suddenly plastic becomes a good thing. As absurd as that sounds, we have biologists and scientists saying that because there are bacteria that eat plastic, that use it as nutrient, and because bacteria are single-celled animals and we are made up of single cells, there's no reason that we too could not perhaps process plastics and use it as nutrient. It would solve a lot of the world's famine problems, for example. And there are companies that have produced plastics that they say we can eat and that will be actually can provide protein to humans. This all sounds ridiculous, and yet it seems to be the weird reality. So by accident, I kind of anticipated that in my movie where you have people who eat plastic.
With all due respect, I didn't see it in the film as a good thing. I saw it as sort of a foreboding. If we're not careful, our children will grow up eating plastics.
Yes. It is unlikely that it will be a good thing, but it's almost like a desperation move. It's sort of saying, it's not great, but we actually all the alternatives are worse. Of course, the movie is not really a sort of a polemic about climate change or anything like that. It's a sort of a background structure for some interesting characters who are trying to deal with the reality of what the body is doing under the pressure of environmental change and technology change. So I'm not really, as I say, I mean, this is not. It's not a political film in the most literal sense, but I guess, well, for me, all films are political in the sense that they all come from a particular culture, a particular political structure, and therefore are delivering, even subliminally, something of those structures. Therefore, are political, not in the sense of being a screed against.
They're not didactic.
It's not left wing, right wing, so on and so on.
Sure.
But still political.
Talk to me about the decision to make these characters, these interesting characters, you say, artists. So these are performance artists who go around performing. I'm going to tell you what your film's about. These are performance artists who go around performing live surgery of Viggo Mortensen's character, he's producing organs, he's producing new organs, and they remove them.
Yes.
There's a version of this film where they're surgeons, and there's a version of this film where they're scientists. I found it interesting that you chose performance artists for these characters.
Yeah, I don't know if you could call it a decision to do that. I just started to write it, and I was interested in performance art, and in particular body artists, and even in the early 2000s, or when I wrote it in the late 1990s, there were performance artists who used their bodies as their paintbrush or their palette or their models, their sculpt, their clay. And I thought, okay, that's incredible dedication. I mean, because a lot of the things that they were doing, surgeries and whatever, were irreversible. So you were really committing yourself in your most essential self. And for me, the body is the essential fact of the human condition. I mean, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in an afterlife. I think
soul
when we die, we disappear. Our bodies are what we are. And I think the more that you can accept that, perhaps the more fully you will understand life itself. You know, that's my feeling. And so that was really the impetus for making these characters body artists, really, as opposed to scientists and doctors, which, of course, I've had many characters in my movies that are scientists and doctors. And in fact, in this movie, Léa Seydoux plays a woman who was a trauma surgeon. So, yes, we still represent that subculture. But only in retrospect am I thinking, okay, well, this is basically presenting the model, the archetype of the artist as giving everything to their art. In this movie, Viggo, literally, his character is giving the insides of his body to his audience as a representation of his creativity, a physical embodiment of it. And I'm thinking, yeah, well, I sort of feel like that myself. I mean, that is, you are opening yourself up, perhaps not surgically.
Sure.
But you are opening yourself up. You're presenting your most sensitive organs to the world.
You're risking yourself,
and you're risking everything that you are when you do that.
Every time you put out something.
Every time it's as though you never did it before.
Right, because there's a world in which David Cronenberg has made his films, and those films are finished, and that's your legacy. But every time you put a new film out,
because for me, legacy is nothing, honestly. I mean, I mean, emotionally, and when I'm presented with a kid who says that my movies really changed his life, and I get that often, and it worries me a little bit. My father forced me to see The Fly when I was 5, and it changed my life. I say, well, was that a good thing?
I'm calling Child Protective Services.
Yeah. So that affects me, of course, and of course I'm pleased by that. But that's not why I'm making movies, though, to leave some kind of legacy. I mean, to me, that's the past. I don't watch my old movies.
No.
And though this movie obviously has many references for those who know my films, it's obvious, to see connections between Crimes of the Future and Videodrome or Dead Ringers. It wasn't anything that I was thinking when I was writing this screenplay, because those references creatively don't give me anything. It's just I'm only focusing on this world I'm trying to create and the characters and so on. In retrospect, I see the connections, and it pleases some people for that. But for me, creatively, it gives me nothing.
Well, they're more for people like me to make. You know what I mean? Like, I often find when I ask people about the running through lines through their work, sometimes you get a lovely answer, but sometimes I feel like that's something that other people need to do, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose somewhere there might be a filmmaker who deliberately wants to make those connections and revels in that. Just as there are directors I know who will say, this one shot is exactly like that scene in that Brian De Palma movie, and they feel that there's some connection, it's kind of a secret homage or something. And then I suppose you could decide to make secret homages to yourself, and then they'd be not so secret. But I don't get any pleasure from that myself. And as I say, creatively, it doesn't help you create the world of the film that you're making.
Do you think about the audience at all?
Oh, yes. I think of the audience all the time.
Really?
I want the audience to be involved and to understand and to be emotionally connected. Absolutely.
Because there is, I seem to be repeating myself, but I've met filmmakers, songwriters especially, I make this for me. And if they like it, good enough.
Yeah.
But I make this for me.
Nah. No, I mean, I take delight in creating stuff, just like a kid takes delight in creating something in a sandbox, I mean, I really think there's a huge element of play in movie making, and probably in all art, but in particularly here, where you're dressing up in funny clothes and you're pretending to be people you aren't. I mean, that's kid stuff. That's play. But that's what makes it potent, because that's instinctive in children. So when you do that, there's, of course, a lot of pleasure that you get from it. You get pleasure from it. It tortures you, too, when things are going wrong, of course. But there's pleasure. And that's the part that's for yourself. But you are making it for an audience. I mean, if you make a movie that shuts out any audience completely, I'd have to say that's a failure. I mean, that's,
I want to talk a little bit about the journey here. You studied science at the University of Toronto. You went in to study science.
I did it. I studied science for a year, organic chemistry.
I was going to ask, was it general science or was it organic chemistry?
And I was really interested in cell biology, and it turned out much later cell biology became the hot thing in science, or the organic sciences anyway, because the workings of the human cell are so complex and so sophisticated. When you think of those drawings that you had to do when you were a kid in high school, maybe doing some physics.
The walls of the cell, the nucleus.
You have
the
ectoplasm, you have this and that. The cytoplasm, I mean, not ectoplasm.
I'm glad you said it, not me.
I know you would have corrected
that. Right.
Yeah. But so sophisticated, and we're still figuring out. I mean, a cell is like a tiny little universe, incredibly complex. And so it's very exciting because it is the essence of life on Earth, the cell.
So you went in interested in the cell, interested in molecular biology. When does filmmaking happen? When do you go, that's something I got to do?
Well, by accident, really. I always thought I'd be a writer, and I aspired to be a novelist.
You liked Asimov, right?
Asimov was a model in that he was actually a genuine scientist who practiced science professionally, but was also a sci-fi writer who practiced that professionally. And I thought that could be me. That could be a way that I could go. Filmmaking in Toronto in the late 50s, 60s was not an option. Nobody was making films. It's not like growing up in L.A. like Spielberg, and where everybody's father and mother worked in the business, and so it was a possibility. Here, that was as exotic as building a car. Nobody in Toronto was building cars or making a car company. They came from someplace else.
Right.
And the same with films. Films came from Hollywood or Europe.
So who do you see that goes, oh, no, they are doing that. I can do that.
That was the New York Underground. That was the inspiration. And for Ivan Reitman, too, I mean, in the beginning. And that's why we created the Canadian Filmmakers Co-op based on Jonas Mekas' co-op. The idea was that forget about the commercial interaction of filmmaking. We would make films for nothing, basically, underground films, and then we would distribute them through a co-op that would allow schools or anybody who wanted to screen films. I mean, there were screenings in Toronto on the street. People would hang up sheets, and we'd have screenings on Bloor Street often.
It must have been so exciting.
It was incredibly exciting.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. But it was still underground, and there was Cinecity.
Yeah.
Cinecity was a theater that was made out of a post office on Charles Street near Yonge, and it was Film Canada was the company across the street that ran it, and we would invite people like Kenneth Anger and Ed Emshwiller. I don't think Andy Warhol ever showed up. No, I think he was in Toronto, actually, but at one point. But we'd show their films. There would be, because they were usually short, so you'd see like 20 films. And then you'd walk outside, and on the street, you would have coffee and, I must say, croissant. Mm-hmm. And you would talk to Ed Emshwiller or Kenneth Anger, and or the Kuchar brothers, and it was fantastic because it was accessible.
Yeah, it was there for you.
It was the ethos of the 60s was just, it's just go and do it yourself, Yeah. It was, and you grab a camera and make a film. You don't have to be in the film industry. You don't have to go to film school. Just do it, no problem. Then, and then I saw a film called Winter Kept Us Warm.
Winter Kept Us
Warm. At the University of Toronto. I remember seeing a poster for it next to the first poster I ever saw referencing the Vietnam War, because I didn't even know where Vietnam was.
It was like an anti-Vietnam protest thing?
Yeah, and it was encouraging protest at the university. Winter Kept Us Warm was an actual movie made in 35 millimeter by David Sector, who was a student. And in that movie were my friends as actors. That shocked me. It really shocked me. It's a shock that you can't reproduce now because kids know you can make movies. They do it with their cell phone. But then it was stunning because it was like a Hollywood movie, except it had your next door neighbor, the guy that you hated, but he was, played baseball with him, and suddenly he's a star in the movie. That was a shock. And that was one step up from underground. It let me know that filmmaking was accessible, that you could do that. So that's when I started to think about commercial movies in the sense that I would be paid for making it, and the people who worked on it, it would be a profession.
Can you get you to pop your headphones on there? All right, so this is from 1975. It was your first big feature. This is from the trailer for Shivers, also known as They Came From Within. Take a listen to this.
What are they? Raging demons that must be exorcised, bloodthirsty creatures that must be killed, or incarnations of absolute evil. They came from within. If this picture doesn't make you scream and squirm, you'd better see a psychiatrist. Quick.
So the reason I wanted to play that for you is, especially now that you told me you don't go back and watch your old stuff, what do you make of hearing that?
How silly was that? That was totally silly, especially mentioning demons, which, is totally something I'm not interested in. Being a long-term atheist, demons just don't rate it. Very silly, but at the same time, that was my first trip to L.A. was with my friend Norman Snyder, and it was because the Canadian Film Development Corporation, which later became Telefilm Canada, a government investment body investing in films, were really quite shocked and grossed out at my script, which was called, at one point, Orgy of the Blood Parasites.
Okay, right.
Yeah, that was just, a beginning. And then it ended up being called Shivers. But in the States, it was called, ultimately, They Came From Within.
Right.
So they changed it. Norman and I went down to L.A. We rented a a red Mustang convertible. We were stopped by the police. We had all on Hollywood Boulevard. We had all the great L.A. experiences that you could have. Lorne Michaels was down there doing a Lily Tomlin special, so I had a friend down there because I knew
you knew
him.
Lauren?
I knew him from Toronto.
Yeah, of course, right.
But I was really there because I thought I couldn't make any movies in Canada. So I thought I might have to move to L.A. to get the movie made. And sure enough, I went to Roger Corman's company. I went to AIP, which was American International Pictures. And this commercial is like what they would have come up with if I had made it there, and the distributor came up with it. It's quite misleading, but it sort of gets the message across, that it's a scary movie and it has something to do with things that come from within something.
What led you down to what interests you, or what interested you then in the darker side of things? Because you're right, a die-hard atheist. There's no demonry.
Yeah.
There's no Satanism.
Yes.
What do you think led you towards the darker side of that stuff?
I don't think it's the darker side.
But really, though?
No, come on. I think it's the realistic side.
It depends on your perspective on realistic,
If you're an
I suppose.
existentialist, it means that you're accepting death as a reality, and oblivion as a reality, and non-existence as a reality. These are very, very hard things for people to accept, understandably. And so, to me, is that the dark side? No, it's the realistic side, And how do you absorb that? The other aspect of that is that humans are very tricky animals. We are capable of incredible creativity and incredible destructiveness, as is evident every day as we look on the net. So, to me, it's just it's really dealing with the human condition. I mean, that is the subject of art. All art is an examination of the human condition from whatever perspective you happen to choose. Plus, as George Bernard Shaw said, conflict is the essence of drama. So, to have a movie in which everybody's really nice and really nice to each other and very kind, not much of a movie, I must say.
To have a movie, I can't believe I'm arguing this with you. To have a movie where there's conflict, but the conflict is we explore impermanence through a more spiritual lens, or we explore impermanence through our relationships with one another, or we explore non-existence through our interconnectivity with one another. And the feeling you get from watching the movie is a peace with non-existence. That's also a film that would deal in non-existence.
Why didn't you tell me this before? My whole career would have been totally, totally different.
Well, you know what I mean. Maybe
I know what you mean, but
yeah.
that's boring. Let's face it.
Well, what I'm trying to mean is when I say, I think darker might have been the wrong word.
Yeah, but it's okay. I understand.
Yeah.
I can explain it too.
Come on.
So it's the body, all right? The body for me is the essence of human existence.
Okay.
It is what we are.
Mm-hmm.
And everything comes from that, including technology, which in the 1950s, technology was inhuman stuff from outer space that threatened us, with strange weapons and stuff like that. But for me, technology has always been ultra-human, a complete extension of what we are. Our fist becomes, a missile. We throw a rock. We see. We hear. The phone. All of that is.
If we use artificial intelligence, it's the brain. It's
the brain. Yeah. So technology also becomes what we are, for the good and the bad, and you see it with every new technology. You see the internet, you see social media. It's great, it's wonderful, and it's horrible and horrifying at the same time. Brings out the worst in us and also the best. So, to me, it's just natural to go there. I'm diving into the essence. I want the essence of what we are and the essence of the human condition, and it takes me there. And I think perhaps you will agree. Perhaps others have said that Crimes of the Future has all that stuff that we're just talking about, but also has a very strange tenderness. It's a very strange love story, but that really is a love story that you can feel. It's palpable. There's kindness in the movie. In fact, there's not really a villain exactly in the movie either. So it's an odd thing, which I think represents accurately the strangeness of being a human being.
There's warmth in the movie. There's, I don't want to spoil it, but towards the end, there's a scene where it dawns on one of the characters what this is potentially doing to future generations, and that is warmth. There's warmth in this movie.
Yes.
I want to go back to something you said earlier. You were having a hard time getting the films made in Canada.
Yeah.
I heard a story about you that the House of Commons was debating whether your films deserved funding.
Yeah. Yes. That had to do with after Shivers was made and the government invested in it, and then people were shocked. And it was because Robert Fulford, writing under the name Marshall Delaney for Saturday Night Magazine, wrote a really negative review of Shivers and said it was, I forget, violent and obscene or pornographic or something, and said that if this is the kind of films that Canada must make to have an industry, then we should not have an industry. He said that. And this was a disappointment to me because I liked him, and he had seen my first two underground features, Stereo and Crimes of the Future, not to be confused with the new Crimes of the Future. And it wrote very sort of positively about them, said that Stereo was like an elegant dream, for example. I still remember that. So I was really quite shocked that he didn't get it. I invited him to a screening specifically because I thought he would understand what I was doing, but he had a very negative reaction. And I remember saying to Michael Spencer, who was then head of the CFDC, I said, well, only 10 people read Saturday Night Magazine. And he said, yes, unfortunately, they are the most important 10 people in terms of you getting money. So they resisted financing my next movie, which was to star a genuine porn star, Marilyn Chambers.
Yeah.
You see where it all starts to go.
I actually watched that interview where they were talking to you about that on the way in. What is that like for you personally, David? What is that like for you on a personal level to have your work be? I have to imagine your day-to-day is kind of messed up at that point.
On one level, I just laugh. I've had movies actually censored. There was something called the Ontario Censor Board. They were very honest about it being a censor board. Then they got nervous and changed it to the Ontario Classification Board. But we all knew it was a censor board. They would actually take your prints and cut them themselves. They would cut out pieces themselves. That's real censorship. On a certain level, you're outraged and you're injured and you really want vengeance and retribution and recognition and everything else. And on another level, you just laugh and laugh and laugh at the stupidity,
I wanted to ask, so things start, there's this growing curiosity about you outside of Canada. Scanners and Videodrome do really well. You eventually make the Dead Zone, the adaptation of Stephen King's The Dead Zone with Christopher Walken. And things start getting really big. I'm always curious about this. When you start out idolizing the New York underground, when you start to realize that you can make films without a commercial intent or without commercialism being at the forefront of that. And then the money starts coming and then the studios start coming. And I've heard stories that you got offered like Beverly Hills Cop. That's true?
That's true. That's true.
And you
Top Gun.
Flashdance?
Flashdance, yep.
Turned them all down.
And at first, Revenge of the Jedi, which later became Return of the Jedi, because the Jedi don't take revenge, but it took them a while to realize that.
Return of the Jedi, like Star Wars?
Yeah, I got a phone call. I was in my kitchen. I got a phone call, and the guy says, I'm with Lucasfilms, and George was wondering if you'd be interested in directing the next Star Wars movie. It's called Revenge of the Jedi. And I said, well, I don't usually do other people's material. And then there was suddenly a click, and that was the end of that. So was that an offer? I don't know, but sort of, That was my Star Wars adventure.
What happens when money and studios starts to intersect with your work?
It's not what you think, because It's not as though you are showered with money and there are no strings attached.
Yeah.
There are tons of strings attached.
Yeah.
So it's never, and it's never as carte blanche as you would perhaps imagine. The classic line for me is, "We love your work. We want to work with you, just not this." Whatever it is, just not this. There was a time when I was going to do a Scanners TV series, and it was ABC or NBC. It was one of the big three networks. I forget which one. And they were really wanting to do it. But then they'd say, "But of course you can't have an exploding head." And I say, "Well, what do you mean? I mean, everybody knows that's, the signature moment in Scanners." "Yeah, but this is TV." So they would whittle it away until there was nothing left. And then they'd say, "Well, and now this is boring." And I would say, "Well, yeah, because you took away everything that was interesting." So that was one experience. And the other thing is, I have had some moments in studio executive suites they were just like satire. I mean, they were absolutely like from a movie satirizing Hollywood. And honestly, I would have taken great offense at some of the things that happened, but they were so ludicrous that I laughed. I mean, sometimes out loud.
I mean, what ends up happening too is you start to get a bit of a canon, a bit of a reputation. It was interesting to read old news articles leading up to this interview.
Which I don't do, by the way.
Well, I'm here to do it for you, David.
I know.
One thing I did notice is all the nicknames you've been given in the media. The king of venereal horror.
Yeah. I said, "It's a small kingdom, but it is mine."
The Baron of Blood.
Well, okay, Baron of Blood, I have to take that one, because when you're a kid director and you start to do your first interviews, you're a little bit cocky and you kind of say, you anoint yourself. So I actually anointed myself the Baron of Blood. And I kind of had to regret that later, because the first thing you'd get on your Wikipedia entry was the so-called Baron of Blood, And the one expression that has seemed to take hold, though, is body horror.
Yeah.
And they say I'm the inventor of the body horror genre or whatever. I've never called it that, and I think I wouldn't have called it that, because to me it's not horrific. It's the body beautiful or something, not body horror, but it sticks, and okay, so.
I mean, speaking of Laura Michaels, did you see that they have a new cast member who describes herself, or her work is described as body horror comedy, and they're doing like body horror style sketches on SNL now?
No, but it sounds great.
I'll send it to you. It's great. By the way, I want to tell you my favorite nickname you had in those old news articles: Dave Dupre.
Now, that was somebody who just invented that himself. No one has ever called me that. I've never called myself that. Because depravity is the only time I was ever accused of depravity was when Crash debuted at Cannes in 1996. An English critic said this goes beyond the bounds of depravity. So even there, I wasn't within depravity; I was beyond. But Dave Dupre was just some guy wrote that.
I get a great sense of warmth from you, though.
Of what?
A great sense of warmth, like a great sense of kindness from you for someone who seems to have this reputation, David.
Apparently, I am quite kind and considerate.
Yeah, you seem lovely.
And actually sweet.
Yeah.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
And it's actually true. What can I say? I mean, people expect you to somehow replicate what they saw on screen, and what they saw on screen scared them or disturbed them or troubled them, so expect you personally to be that as well, which I'm not.
I heard Scorsese was afraid of you. He was afraid to meet you.
He said, finally we met. He said he was afraid to meet me. I said, "Marty, you're the guy who made Taxi Driver. I'm actually afraid to meet you." It was fun, and we've been friends ever since.
I want to go back to Crimes of the Future, which features the line, "Body is reality."
Yes.
How does that relate to you as you're getting older?
It relates to me very directly because, for example, just before I went to Cannes, not long before, I had cataract surgery on my eyes, and that has altered color, sharpness, detail. It really is a new world. for me.
Yeah.
I actually joked with my director of photography that we would have to redo the color timing of Crimes of the Future because it was all going to look different to me. And in fact, it has. It does.
That sounds a bit terrifying for a filmmaker, to be honest.
Actually, it's great.
Yeah?
Yeah. No, it's great. It's great. As you notice, I'm not wearing glasses now. I would have been wearing glasses two months ago. So also I have hearing aids.
Yeah.
Okay. So I am bionically enhanced already, and that has, and it's sort of a combination of technology in my body, and it produces literally a different reality. No fooling, for real. And that just confirms my anticipation of what it would be like to change yourself in terms of, to body morphism, transmorphism, and so on. So even though I have not done body art, performance art myself, I am a piece of body art anyway, just as a matter of course. And anybody who has surgery and had things removed, had a hernia operation, had their gallbladder removed, they are, they're changing their body and they're changing their reality. I mean, I often, not jokingly, this kind of shocks some people when you say it. It's very simple. So you're sitting there, and next to you is your dog, and you're in a room and you're watching TV with your dog sitting on the couch beside you. And you occupy different realities in that one room because what your dog sees and smells and hears and senses and communicates is totally different from you. If you were became that dog, you would not know where you were, what universe, what planet you had come from. And yet you're both physically there, and it's because your bodies are different. They've evolved differently, and they do different things. So, or a spider, 8 eyes. I mean, a spider, though, has a body and lives in a reality. And I really feel that. I've always had great empathy for animals, and part of it, I think, was that it's like, what is reality for this creature, for a praying mantis, for something that can fly?
Isn't it a shared consciousness?
That's very contentious, because consciousness suggests an awareness of self.
Yeah.
And you can tell from children that at a certain point, they do not have an awareness of self. They don't become shy because they don't know they exist. And then at a certain point, children suddenly start to become shy.
I start to exist.
Yes, because there's an I that exists and is being observed, and it makes you shy. So that's another thing. I mean, having children is the best education into what a human being is. It's really hard to understand that unless you've lived with and raised children.
A pleasure to meet you.
It's a pleasure to meet you. Thanks a lot.